now.
She does. Hello, my name is Jim Winter. I am the co-director of Transcendent Paranormal Society.
I'm Allie Schmaltz, I'm the other one.
That's a good way of putting it, yes. So we're here tonight to share with you some history about locations we've been to, some evidence of locations we've been to, which is the part everybody loves to hear and see in this case. So first I'm going to give you a little history of Transcendent Paranormal Society. So we were established in early October of 2018. We had actually trained with another director out of the Twin Cities and another team for about a year and a half before we broke up on our own. We broke up on our own in October of 2018 because the director we were with, number one, was in the Twin Cities 5 hours away. So it was really hard to help local people when our director was 5 hours away. But also we had some philosophical differences. He was going in the direction of wanting to have his own paranormal TV show, wanting to be a celebrity. We weren't into that. We were wanting to help local people and educate people on the paranormal. So we split off, and 5 of the 6 members of that team came off to form our team here. Next thing I want to share, and then as we go along, if you have questions, feel free to stop us and ask. There'll also be time at the end for questions. We want to share with you how we got into the paranormal and investigating. So I'll let Allie go first, so I can take a break.
You're winded, are you?
Yeah.
So my paranormal origin story is, I think, very similar to a lot of people's in that they had experiences when they were kids. Anybody had experiences? There's always time. So my parents, when I was young, we moved into a really old house in Dubuque. It used to be a model electric home. So like when people wanted to see what living with electricity was like, they would tour our house. So a lot of updates needed to be done when we moved in. We started pretty much renovating right away, which is kind of known in the paranormal field sometimes to stir things up. So pretty quickly after moving in, I started having experiences in my old bedroom, and it wasn't like you wake up in the middle of the night and see something. It was like I would lay down to go to sleep and there would be a dark shadow at the end of my bed. It didn't happen every night, but it happened a lot of nights. So that was super fun as like a 6-year-old to deal with. And you know, my parents are awesome, but they would just kind of acted like anybody would act and be like, oh, they're kind of afraid of the dark, it's a new place. And so as time went on, I just got sick of it because I was like sick of being afraid and hiding under my covers every night. So eventually I said, like, just told it to go away. Like all of the 6-year-old bravery I had just came out, and then I hid back under the covers. And so it did stop. And I kind of put it out of my mind as I got older. And then my younger sister ended up moving into that bedroom once the house was kind of finished. And she started having issues sleeping as well. And she needed, the door open, all the lights on. So eventually I asked her about, why she was having such a hard time. And she told me that she was seeing a shadow at the end of her bed and it scared her. And I had never said anything about that to her because I didn't want to scare her, but that sort of just cemented the fact that what I experienced was real. So that's when the opportunity came to join the team. I was like, that's what I want to do, is I want to give people validation like I got. So that's why I got into the team.
My origin story, as a kid growing up, I was always fascinated with the Bermuda Triangle, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, ghosts, all that kind of stuff. In September of 2015, my mom didn't make it out of heart surgery, passed away. And that night, we went back to my house, my parents' house. My dad said, why don't you take something home to remember your mom by? She collected teddy bears, had over 400 of them. She had 10 that were like really special to her. So I looked over those 10 bears pretty carefully and picked one out, brought it home with me. I slept with it that night, not afraid to admit I slept with a teddy bear. The next morning when I woke up, that teddy bear had a green mark on its forehead. My mom's favorite color, green. So that rattled me a little bit. And then 9 months after that, my only brother committed suicide. So in the span of 9 months, I lost half my family. So I really wanted to try and find answers for what happened. And around a little later after that, There was the paranormal team we actually started training with was coming to Edinburgh Manor in Scotch Grove, Iowa, just down the road. And as a freelance journalist at the time, I asked if I could just cover them for their 2-day public event. And I did, and I had a paranormal experience within 5 minutes of being in that building. And most of my professional career, I was a newspaper editor, so a very logical, objective thinker. So when I had that happen to me within 5 minutes of being in the building that I couldn't explain, that thing hasn't happened since, I was hooked. So I had the opportunity to become the lead investigator of the Dubuque chapter he was creating. And like I said, from there, we kind of trained for a little while and spun off onto our own. So
for what we do for the most part, what we're going to talk about tonight is historical locations, because they kind of have some of the most folklore attached to them, as well as, you know, all the stories. So, but what we do, our bread and butter is actually helping out real people in their homes and their businesses. So that's really why we do what we do. The historical locations are super fun. Don't get us wrong. We love to do those too. But helping people in their homes is really what our team's all about. So kind of just the way an investigation goes, usually just kind of give you a little bit of an idea is we'll get a call or someone will visit our website, email us because they're having activity. We go out and we do a walkthrough of their home. So we get kind of a lay of the land. We sit down, we talk to them about what they're experiencing. From there, we can do some background research into the history of the house, which Jim really likes history and stuff. So usually he's the one who gets to do all that fun, digging through deeds and all that good stuff, just to see if anything's happened on the property that could explain some of the activity. We always try to disprove anything we can first, because that's the way this field should go, right? You should try to rule out anything else before you call it possibly paranormal activity. So after that, we usually go on kind of an initial investigation, depending on how big the location is. It's usually like around 4 hours the first time we go. We use a bunch of equipment, which Jim's going to talk about in a little bit, and see if we can gather any evidence to back up what the client is claiming to go on. We do a big evidence review. So all of the recordings that you take, if you do 4 hours worth of recording, that means you get to listen to 4 hours of audio. And a lot of the time, it's just silence. The most glamorous part of being a paranormal investigator is listening to silence and watching dust on the screen. So much fun. Yeah, and then you get to dig through those little pieces of evidence that might be something. And then the whole team comes together to go over all the evidence, and we can see if we can kind of piece together what's happening in the home, some explanations behind why they're having activity, and sort of where we go from there. Whether they want, where they can live, they can coexist with their spirits in their house, or whether they want those things to move on. So that's kind of how a typical investigation goes.
Of course, we didn't place the batteries.
So that's okay. We go through a lot of batteries.
Yes, we do. Okay, so equipment, some of the equipment we use, we have some of it here. We don't have all of it. The things we don't have here, we do have a full DVR system that records in, what's the word? 4K. Records in 4K, but the kind of recording. It sees in the dark, basically. So infrared, yes. So we set those up. Those are static cameras that record all night long. So it's kind of eyes for us when we're not in a room. As far as other equipment we use little bitty handheld audio recorders, static recorders in rooms, again, usually with our DVR cameras, recording all night long. So it's our ears when we're not in a certain part of the house. We have a nice special recorder. This is a Zoom recorder. This records about 15 feet out and 360 degrees. So much more sensitive than those little handheld recorders and much more expensive. This one runs about $350, whereas these little ones are about $60, $70. So yeah, this is one of my babies. So, we have a millimeter, which measures, let's see if this one's batteries work for this one.
Do you need batteries? I can run it back.
We're fine.
Okay.
This one measures temperature changes. It also measures electromagnetic fields and changes in EMF. A lot of common everyday items give off electromagnetic frequencies, especially alarm clocks, old microwaves, things like that. So that's one of the things we do when we do the initial walkthrough of a location, is we will use those devices to see if there's any stray EMF, because EMF will cause, it can cause anxiety, nausea, hallucinations, headaches, all kinds of things. So if there's stray EMF, we know we go back to do the investigation. Hey, if something's going on here, it might be EMF, it's probably not paranormal. So this also measures, this one I know will work, yes. This one also measures EMF, it's a K2 meter, so depending on how much EMF there is, it'll light up different colors. And we've actually used this to be able to communicate with spirits in investigations where we'll ask them to light it up red, yellow, and it's happened a few times where that will happen. So this is a good tool to use. This is a REM pod. Excellent. So, and this millimeter, this is probably about 120 bucks. This is about 70 bucks. We have a few of those. This one's 380. So this is a proximity sensor. So if a spirit comes close to this antenna, it'll light up. And we have had this go off in investigations and also answer questions using this. So it's a fun little toy. Right. We have spirit boxes. We have the SB7 and the SB11. Does anybody know what a spirit box is? Okay, this is a, I'll turn one out. They're really loud. Let's see if this will. Oh, it will. Of course, the spirit box will turn on.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can't hear it, but what this does is this rapidly scans radio frequencies. This one only goes one direction, forward or backward. This one actually scans, you can scan forward and backward at the same time. And what the theory is that spirits can use the electricity and the radio signals to talk. This thing scans radio frequencies so rapidly, it's supposed to be impossible for words and sentences to come out. So when something does, theory is that's a spirit trying to talk to you. So we've had success with them, with those. We don't put a lot of credence into those because what they say is open to interpretation. So unless all of us who've done an investigation agree that it's saying what we think it's saying, we throw it out because it's too open to interpretation. But what we will do, we also use that with called the Estes method. And normally in a spirit box session, you just have that thing running and everybody is hearing it, seeing what they think it says. In the Estes method, what you do is you have one person holding that device and they have headphones on. So all that noise, which is a constant is coming into their ears.
Super pleasant.
Super pleasant. And I'm usually the one who has to be doing that. So you have one person blindfolded with headphones on listening to that. And then you have 30 to 50 feet away, you have people actually asking questions. And the person who is listening to this can't hear the questions being asked. They're only saying what's coming out of there. And we've had very good results with that. And that kind of eliminates some of the interpretation and all that stuff. You have one person saying what's coming out. So we've had really good results with that. And then probably the thing that's the most, well, this is an EDI plus meter. This measures electromagnetic frequencies, vibration, temperature changes, humidity changes, barometric pressure changes, all kinds of fun stuff. So, and it records onto a little chip so you can see when things happen, you can mark it on here and be like, oh, there's temperature differentiation. Go back and look and see if all the other atmospheric pieces changed as well. So this is about 350 as well. And then we have the most fun one, which people just like to look at. Is our laser grid. So cats really like it. But we set this up like in hallways or rooms. What this does is if a spirit walks in front of this, it blocks out the laser so you can see something moving in front of it. And we've actually had things, whoop. Yeah, so this gets really mesmerizing. If you look at this for like 30 minutes at a time in the dark, you can really begin. And then if I start doing this, oh jeez. Yeah, so
like those Christmas lights.
Yes, exactly. So that's some of the equipment we have that we use.
Yes, it's expensive hobby. Very expensive hobby to get into this stuff, but there's new stuff coming out all the time.
Yes.
We've got some new pieces of equipment to try out that we're really excited about. Yes. Okay, so on to the fun stuff. We thought tonight basically what we would do is we present evidence again from historical locations. we do, like I said, we do houses and stuff, but a lot of times people don't want their information spread on the internet to the world, which is totally understandable. So for presentations like this, we try to stick with kind of historic sites. So a lot of these places, if you're interested in, you can go and visit them yourself. Some of them, if you want to, you can even rent them out to do investigations. Cool part about what we do is a lot of buildings that have activity that would normally get torn down after they've kind of lived out their life as what they are, get saved because of paranormal investigation teams. Basically, you pay to go to the location, you rent it out for the night, and you're able to do your thing. So places like Edinburgh Manor probably would have gotten torn down, because what do you do with a building that big and kind of dilapidated, right? But we're like, let us in there, let us talk to the dead people, okay? So so we'll go through some of those tonight. Some of them you might be familiar with, some of them might be new.
All right, first one is my favorite. It's kind of our honey hole. We're the only paranormal team allowed to investigate there, and we are allowed to go there whenever we want to train, to do investigations. It's called the Tavern. It was built in 1840 in Lafayette County, Wisconsin, so Southwest Wisconsin. The location is the last remnant of a town that was called Gratiot's Grove at one point. This building goes way back. So what happened was in 1827, New Yorker, I can't pronounce his name, Fortunatus Berry, moved his family to the Gratiot settlement located at the site of the current tavern. In 1829, he opened a log roadhouse at what was called Berry's Grove. So this was one of the first in the unsettled region, a house of entertainment that took in travelers, offered salt pork, straw pillow, along with hard cider and corn whiskey. So really good stuff back in the day. The tavern was a popular hangout for thirsty miners as well. It was a hostel for weary travelers and a home for a growing family. But also sometimes it was a schoolhouse and a post office. So it has a very long history. So when the Chicago to Galena stage line extended service to Shullsbury, Berry decided to build a new wood frame hotel, complete with a livery stable, bar and dining rooms, dance hall, and 7 guest rooms. At a well-attended ball in early 1842, a young man from Kentucky, drunk and brandishing a pistol, shot a man through the heart. And he was the cousin of host Adeline Berry. The assailant escaped, was captured, tried, and condemned to death. He was hanged before a crowd of 5,000 at Mineral Point, one of the last Wisconsin executions. And then a decade later, unfortunately, cholera spread from a rail camp to a stage line to the tavern, killing 11 guests and family within days. With a doctor and a coffin builder among the dead, bodies were wrapped in gunny sacks and stacked in the still standing stone root cellar, awaiting burial. 6 additional travelers and stage drivers died following stops at the hotel. And on the property today is a cholera victims cemetery. Yes.
So this place is a little unique in that it hadn't been investigated before. And we didn't have a lot to go on as far as like what the claims were. We kind of were going in a little blind. Really, the only thing that they knew had happened was this was rented out by a family before the nonprofit that rents it now got it. And they know they had activity of some sort because they heard it through the grapevine, but they didn't know specifically what happened. The other thing that they had happen was they do give tours of this location. And on multiple occasions, when they would get to the root cellar part, people would just refuse to go in. And there was one lady I know that Corey said that physically got ill, like she felt like she was going to throw up and had to leave. And that was before they would tell them that, oh yeah, all the bodies were also in here. So yeah, we didn't have a lot to go on claims. So first time we went, we sort of set up equipment everywhere and just to see if we could catch it.
Yep, and on multiple, now we're going to share some of the evidence here. So on multiple occasions, we've gotten evidence pertaining to a headstone that is currently sitting in the root cellar. The headstone belongs to a man named Peter. It was actually found up the road from the tavern when they were doing some digging, and the property owners didn't really know what to do with it, so they gave it to the nonprofit group that actually maintains the tavern and is trying to turn the tavern into a museum. So this particular night, we were getting EMF spikes in the root cellar, which we don't usually get a lot of activity in the root cellar, so we found that to be a little odd. And we decided, whenever we mentioned the headstone, we were getting EMF spikes. So we decided to address it with necrophonic session. So the necrophonic is an app, and there's Spiritus as well that you put on your phone that is similar to the Spirit Box, but with the necrophonic and Spiritus, it's actually a phonetic bank. There's no words in it, so if a spirit is going to use that to speak, it has to put phonetics together to say a word. So it's a little better than the Spirit Box. So we decided to address it in a session. So in this file, we hear the words. Oh, we want to talk about what we heard, or play it first, and then tell them. Let's play it. Okay. Yeah. Because we don't want to tell you what we think we hear. Yeah. We want to play the evidence first. Okay.
And then when you hear something totally different, then we'll tell you what we hear.
Usually we're talking to the resort. And because it's true, it comes in. Yeah.
I think you just said root, that's what.
That's stuff too.
Deer.
Usually we're talking to the resort. And because it's true, it comes in. Yeah.
I think you just said root, that's what.
That's stuff too.
You guys hear it? Yes. So right here it says root, and then shortly after it says stuff.
Root and stuff. So then as we're talking about what we just heard, and shortly after, we get another response when we ask if Peter wants something else done with his headstone.
Would you like them to do something else with your headstone, Peter?
Yes.
Would you like them to do something else with your headstone, Peter?
Yes.
You can hear that one.
Yes.
I do.
Yes.
So this is a different, we've been here on a lot of occasions. Yeah, a lot of occasions, but it's fun every time we get different interactions. So on this particular occasion, this was the first investigation where we brought members of the public with us. We did a fundraiser for their group. So on investigations, I've been known to talk a lot, and sometimes I need my other team members to say, like, Allie, shut up and let the spirits, talk, give them some time, because they're, just be quiet. So this piece of evidence is funny to me for that reason. So there's me and two other of our investigators are talking. We're getting ready to split the group up, and we're just talking about whether we can have a group in the cemetery and a group in the root cellar, and we won't hear each other. So you're going to listen for actually another female voice that talks after I say we might be okay.
Half at the cemetery, half at the, yes, we'll have to see if we can hear each other. Oh, yeah, yeah, problem, but I think if we shut that door. Like half at the cemetery, half at the, yes, we'll have to see if we can hear each other. Oh, yeah, yeah, problem, but I think if we shut that door.
Hear what it says? Limited.
Stop talking.
Yes. Pretty much tells me to stop talking, which is good advice, I think.
Thanks, Spirit.
Yeah, really.
All right. So this next piece of evidence, I don't even need the notes for it because it's probably my favorite piece of audio evidence I've ever captured, and because it has a story behind it. So this was the first time that myself and two other male investigators who were actually with the team that we started off with in the beginning, we went to the tavern to check it out, do a small investigation to see if it was worth bringing everybody. So you're going to hear us talking. You're going to hear some metal rattling, kind of like you hear like hangers on a bar for clothing. But then you're going to hear a really deep male voice come in. That's not any of us. So we'll play that a couple times, and then I'll explain the backstory behind this.
Yeah.
Okay. Can anybody make that out? There's a reason why you can't. Okay. So that is a very low voice saying "Nakshua," which gibberish, right? This tavern is located in the part of southwest Wisconsin where the Winnebago Indians used to reside. The Winnebago Indians are now the Ho-Chunk Indian tribe. So on a whim, I took this piece of audio and sent it to the Ho-Chunk Language Center, which is based in Madison, and asked their elders and language experts to listen to it just on the off chance that it was something from their language. So when they responded back, the first thing they asked was, were one of your investigators Native American? So, no. Why? Because they said, because that voice you just captured, Nakshua, is a word from our Winnebago Indian language that means tree scraper, which was a nickname common among men of the tribe at the time they lived there. And if you listen to it, we'll play it again. If you listen to it, it sounds like what you would picture a very old Native American man to speak like. So we'll play it. Yeah, so that's not any of us, and we didn't hear it at the time, but that's kind of my favorite because we were able to take that and validate from an expert source that that was indeed a Native American spirit talking to us.
And you don't even know this yet, Jim, but I just thought of it. So we just went over some evidence from this location from the last one we did. And we caught that exact same voice in a different part of the building. It sounds almost identical. Again, saying something that I can't understand. During the time we decided that we were going to play like really bad little film music very loudly in the ballroom just to see if we could upset anyone. And so I'm interested to see if we can send that to them.
Oh yes, let's do it.
Okay, next location. Anyone ever heard or been to Edinburgh? Yes. Okay. Usually this is the location that everyone knows about because it has been, if you watch any paranormal TV, pretty much everyone has been here.
Yes.
It's a very, very popular, very active location, but it's also got a really cool history. So this Edinburgh Manor used to be what was known as a poor farm. Is anybody familiar with that term or heard of those before? A very interesting thing we used to do with people who couldn't. Well, let me just read it to you because I wrote it down because I thought it was interesting the way they described it. So this poor farm ran from about 1850 to 1910. And the people they described as, it's described as a comfortable retreat for the lazy, able-bodied, and willingly dependent applicants. I thought that was an interesting way to describe it. So basically, sort of the outcasts of society, people who didn't have anyone take care of them, whether they were mentally unstable, they were just kind of down on their luck, or they were elderly and they didn't have any family, got sent to the poor farm. And in exchange for working the crops and the livestock, they would get shelter and they would get food. So after 1910, when the poor farm closed, that's when this structure was erected, known as Edinburgh Manor. And they kind of did similar things. It was used to house the insane, the elderly, the despondent, kind of that whole group of people. So it actually ran to about 2010. So actually it was used up until not that long ago. And when they shut it down, they essentially just like pulled out some stuff, shut the doors and left. So there's still a ton of stuff there left over from when this place was operational. Beds, there's patient files there still, which has to be against some kind of rule, I would think. But yeah, so there they're still kind of going through all the documented deaths. I think they're up to about 300 documented deaths on the property between when it was a poor farm and when it was a manor. And there is a cemetery kind of across the street. I don't think I've been to the cemetery, but so if you didn't have anyone that was going to take you and bury you properly, they would bury them in that cemetery. And I think there's probably unmarked graves around the property too. So
claims, there's a lot. Pretty much anything you can imagine happening in the paranormal world happens here. One of the major claims you'll see there's some rooms on this side. There's also rooms on the back side of the building. There's long hallways on each of the floors. Shadows crossing back and forth in between rooms across the long hallways. On the first floor, there's a spirit of a young girl named Susie, who was allegedly dropped off at the manor and left by her family. Also on the first floor is the spirit of a man who committed suicide with a bed sheet, and his death is documented. And on the second floor, there are two rooms, one at each end of the building, where it is claimed that when you have activity happening in one room, that actually affects the other room on the other end of the building, and activity can happen simultaneously or in concert with each other. And I've had that happen on an investigation there with another group. Shh, don't talk about that. No, I'm kidding. And then perhaps the most notorious spirit resides in the basement. He's dubbed the Joker. No one's ever been able to identify who he is in actuality. But investigators have speculated this is the spirit of an old janitor who worked at the manor. Although many have described this as a negative and threatening presence, we have never experienced anything negative at this location.
So in some of the evidence that we've got here, we've had some real crazy stuff happen at this place. And it's not uncommon. Usually every team that goes in there has something happen to them. So the very first time we went there, it was as part of a public investigation. So my group headed up to the second floor. So we're at the very top of the building. And this place is kind of notorious for, if you're at one end of the hallway, you're going to hear everything going on at the other end of the hallway, and then you'll run over there and whoop, up, now it's on the opposite side. So we decided we were going to split up and try to trick this, right? And so that we would be on both sides at the same time, which also never works. Then they'll find somewhere else to go, or they'll just be silent. So basically what we had is we had a couple people in every room down the hallway, and we would give them a recorder. They'd ask some questions. When they were done, we would take them out of that room. We'd move down the hallway to the next room. So basically we just worked our way down that hallway until we got to the last room, kind of on that side. And we had two people in that room who, one of the men he actually had a family member that he had documented had been a resident at Edinburgh Manor. And so we were wrapping up that session. We were literally just about to leave. And I was like, you know what? We haven't mentioned his name all night, so why don't you just call it out, see if anything happens. So he did. He asked if that person was here. And again, remember that literally the whole group is standing in front of this room. There's two people in that room. There's no one else on this floor. And then we hear probably what at the time, actually still is probably the loudest noise I've ever heard on an investigation ever. It was so loud that people in the basement heard this and radioed to ask us what we were doing up on the top floor. So I'll let you listen to it and you tell me which
one. What was that?
it sounds like.
Sounds like a chair being dragged.
Yeah, something being dragged across the floor. I thought maybe because it was dark, we couldn't really see in the room. I was like, did you guys stand up or something? They're like, no, we're sitting on this bed, we have moved. So then we start running up and down the hallways, trying to figure out what moved. And we're scraping things across the ground to see if we could match that noise. And the closest we got actually was a big metal bed that was in one of the far end rooms. And it sounded exactly like that, except it hadn't moved from when we were in there before. So very interesting. Still can't explain that one.
Second piece of evidence from Edinburgh. Edinburgh Manor does not have electricity save for one room, which is kind of a little central office where people congregate when they first get there. This piece of evidence was captured the first time the team we were with in training. We held a public investigation in Edinburgh. We had brought all of our equipment in. The equipment was still in cases just like this. We took one audio recorder out and set it up to just audio record. I believe it was in the, not the office, but the room right next to it. And you won't hear on this part of the recording, but we can actually hear on the audio recording us closing the metal door to leave Edinburgh, getting into our cars, closing the door, and the cars are driving away. So there was nobody in the building when we caught this. So it's loud, so apologize. But I'll explain what, this one has a backstory to it too, and an explanation. So after we played it a couple times, we'll. All of our equipment's on, we're off. It's better. What does that sound like?
Someone with bad Taco Bell.
Yes, very similar, like a CD, like a CD.
Yeah, like the radio.
Yeah.
Right. So at the beginning, you'll hear it's just radio sounds, but if you paid attention,
I heard hello.
yes, you start hearing a girl saying, especially here, hello, hello, and then another girl says hi. So you want to play just that piece right there. So again, none of our equipment is running. There's no electricity in the building except one little room. So I was friends with the caretaker of the facility at the time we got this. So I reached out to her and said, hey, was there ever a PA system in Edinburgh Manor to talk to the patients and so on? She said, yeah, but it hasn't been operational in 20, 30 years. Why? I played that piece for her and she said, yeah, that's what the PA system would have sounded like when the building was in operation. So yeah, love that piece of evidence. Oh, it's my turn. All right, so this is the Vinton Train Depot in Vinton, Iowa. We actually had we've been there now a few times. We actually had the joy of going to Vinton, Iowa. They have 3 properties that are on the National Historic Register. All 3 have paranormal activity, and we've gotten to investigate all 3, and it was a wonderful time. And so the Vinton Train Depot itself was built in 1899. It's one of the most well-preserved passenger train stations in eastern Iowa. Almost all of the building is in its original state with many original artifacts, as you can see up there in that picture. And that's the telegraph machine. So that was really cool. I love that. Several notable events have taken place in close proximity to the depot, including a railroad worker who was supposedly passed out on the train tracks after a long night of drinking and was hit and killed by a train. And right across the tracks from the depot, literally right over here, compared to the train depot, was the site of one of Iowa's unsolved murders. Myrtle Cook was killed on September 7th, 1925. She was actually shot through an open window in her home and killed. While Myrtle's killer was never arrested, there are a couple possible motives for her killing. Myrtle was a staunch supporter of prohibition, turning in people in the community she believed to be breaking prohibition laws to the authorities. And Myrtle Cook was also a high-ranking member of her local KKK chapter, with 100 marked and robed Klan members showing up to her funeral service. So that is bound to cause some things at this location.
Yes. This is another place that was like relatively new to the paranormal field, right? It hadn't really been investigated maybe once or twice before. Now it's open for tours and anyone who wants to can rent it out for the night and investigate themselves. So they're sort of building the claims as they go and as people have experiences. So again, there wasn't a ton to go off of. There was one team who had a ball set in the middle of the floor, and they say the ball rolled across the floor. We kind of think that was probably because the floor goes like this. So we kind of dismissed that one as probably not paranormal. There's also reports that kind of outside here, there's windows to the inside of the building. So people will be standing inside the building and they'll actually see shadows of people walking outside. We did test out, when we were there, we saw people walking up and down the tracks, late at night as you do. They're very smart. And we kind of tested out hey, if there was actually a human being walking across the tracks, would we be able to get outside in time for them to be out of sight? And you can. So it could be possible that they're just seeing actual people walk through at night, and maybe they don't put together that it could be actually an alive human being. But any other kind of sounds and stuff that happened in the building, they seemed very residual to us. Have you guys heard of that term before when it comes to hauntings? So what residual hauntings are, there's kind of different categories of what we call paranormal activity. There's intelligent activity, which means that it could be someone who's passed away who can actually interact with you. So, if you see, dead Aunt Deb or something, right? And she looks at you and she seems to realize that you're there. Sorry, always your name is Deb. Always pick out someone that's actually in the room that makes it more real. Yeah. So and they look at you and they seem to be aware that you're there, you can interact with them. That might be an intelligent spirit. Or if you're asking questions on like a recorder and you get a direct response to your question that makes sense, also intelligent activity. Then there's residual activity, and that's just kind of activity that sort of plays itself out on a loop over and over and over again, right? It's going to play regardless if you're there or not. It's not going to care that you're there. So could be anything from like the sound of footsteps, right? It's not necessarily that someone's walking down the hallway, but just that someone has walked down the hallway before, and that sound gets played over and over again. So this was a location that we thought there's probably a lot of residual activity, just because there's people that move to that train station all the time, but not necessarily that had like a huge personal connection to it that they want to stay.
Okay. So this first piece of evidence takes place during the Nessus method session, which I explained earlier what that is. So our investigator Brandon is sitting in the telegraph office, which you saw a picture of earlier, while the rest of the group, we were out in the main waiting area. And this is an interesting exchange involving one of our other team members, Tanner. This exchange is a good example of intelligent interaction. However, because of recent experiences in other investigations, we believe this may be coming from a spirit attached to Tanner and not necessarily associated with Devo.
So Brandon, when you hear him talk, he can't hear anything that we're saying or talking about at this time, which makes it all the more interesting.
You know anybody who's in this room right now?
Where?
In this room, where we're sitting? Maybe sitting on the benches and chairs.
Not you. What about me? You know what I did? Dinner! Go away. Go away. Brandon. Dinner!
So yeah, that one's pretty straightforward. We asked Brandon as well afterwards, like, hey, were you messing with us? Could you actually hear what you're saying? And he was like, no, I didn't hear anything you say. Why? What happened? And we were like, well, we called out Tanner a couple times, and actually this happened again with a different person with the headphones on in a different location. Tanner also got called out there. So, and there's another clip that we'll play for you later that also has to do with Tanner. So clearly something wants to get a hold of him from the great beyond. We think that Tanner needs to listen. Yeah.
What's your turn?
Oh, is it still me?
Yeah, you have the next piece of evidence.
Hold up. So this one is, again, a really good example of a residual noise. This one's kind of crazy. We didn't expect a lot. We don't ever really, the past couple of times we've been there, not a ton of stuff happens at this depot. We kind of sit in silence most of the night, and every once in a while something will pop up. But this one was really surprising to us. So we had the Necrophonic app that Jim kind of talked about earlier running. And we were all sitting in what was the men's waiting room at the time, and we weren't really getting a lot coming out of the app. And then we heard this sound that literally sounded like a train was coming and stopping outside the depot. And we're like, oh, that's weird. We didn't hear anything coming. We didn't see any lights coming down the track. So we went out and no train anywhere. And the tracks are pretty much straight. There's no place it could turn off. We would have seen it coming through if there was an actual train. So I'll play that for you. Screeching and breaks. And we're not the only team who's had that experience actually. There was, they keep a journal of experiences that other teams have, everyone kind of writes it down. I was reading that after kind of we were wrapped up with the investigation, and there was another team who said they hadn't heard a train, but they had seen train lights, and they never got to the station. They just kind of came and then they backed up and disappeared. So it was kind of interesting. We had a similar experience with that as well.
You're up again.
Sorry, I did not give myself so much. All right. Ranger House. Okay, this is another really cool historical spot. This is also another one you can visit if you want. It's in Marion, Iowa. This home is now, it's a Victorian mansion. So basically you tour it and you kind of see how life was at that time. This one was built in 1848. Originally, it was just that room all the way to the left. So very small, one room on the downstairs, one room upstairs, and ended up being added on to later when Earl Granger moved his family into the home with his children and his wife Dora. They moved in 1876, and they raised their kids in this house. Unfortunately, as was very common at that time, 4 out of their 7 children ended up dying early. Actually, there was 2 of them that passed within a couple of days of each other. So Dora, who was Earl's wife, she sank into a pretty deep depression due to losing her kids. And also kind of side story, not totally 100% on this, but there are rumors circulating around Marion that Earl moved in with Dora's sister to help take care of her after the children died, and Earl and the sister might have had a little thing, and the sister might have gotten pregnant and had a child that then this Earl and Dora ended up adopting. So, a little tongue-in-cheek action going on there. So cool thing about this house is that it stayed in the Granger family for over 100 years. Then they ended up moving out, selling it. One of the sons lived in the house. The other son built a house literally 2 doors down. So his family was extremely connected to this house. The city ended up taking possession of the home, and one of the Granger's relatives found out about it and happened to have all of the family's original things in a storage unit and donated it all back to the house. So almost all the furniture in this place is originally what the family had. So it looks almost exactly like it did when they lived there.
And you'll see in that top photo there, the roof is gone, being rebuilt. On that roof was torn off in the derecho that went across Iowa. Yeah, it hit Marion hard, so that's why you see the construction going on there. So lots of paranormal claims at this location. Shadows seen throughout the house. Footsteps are heard upstairs. Objects will move from one room to the other. A lady in white is seen in one of the upstairs windows. They hear the old piano being played, which you can see right there. There's a rocking chair in the boys' room is seen to be moving on its own. And there is a full-body apparition of a man that is seen in the carriage house. So I have not had the pleasure of investigating this location yet because I was not available, but we've caught some good evidence from here. So several of the investigators, when our team went there, are seeing a small shadow peeking out of at the bottom of the staircase, which backs up some claims that were shared with us. And Allie is actually asking whether they could just be seeing the shadow cast by the banister. The Ovilus, which is a device we don't have it here. The Ovilus actually has words in it, and spirits can use that to speak and say words. We don't put a lot of credence in it, but sometimes it works. So the Ovilus we have running says something at the exact time one of our investigators says something. And we typically don't use anything that comes out of the Ovilus, as I mentioned, as evidence, unless it directly backs up activity we are having at the time. And this is one of those cases where it did.
And it's not tall. Yeah, it looks like a child's eye. Yes, it does. You're seeing that.
Oh,
yes.
I see what you're saying. I'm gonna be adventurous. No.
No.
Whoa, what is it?
And it's not tall. Yeah, it looks like a child's eye. Yes, it does. You're seeing that.
Oh,
yes.
I see what you're saying. I'm gonna be adventurous. No.
No.
Whoa, they just said no.
You can hear, what do you hear the Ovilus saying?
No.
Yeah, and then our investigator says right after, no. So we have a spirit telling us, no, you dumbass, it's not the banister. It's one of us.
This next one comes from the second floor of that building. We were all in what was the boys' room at the time, and we were getting ready to split up into different rooms. Everyone was going to take a room on the second floor. And so again, there's only 2 male investigators here at the time, and we catch a voice. So we were talking about Tanner earlier. This is the clip that I was talking about. this happened before the depot, which is why we think that's something kind of trying to get involved in. So you'll hear Tanner says something like, "I'll take the master," like he's gonna take the master bedroom. And then there's a whisper after he speaks. It's not the other male investigator that we have. He was right behind him, but it wasn't anything that he said, and we all heard it at the time. So we all heard this voice. It was none of us in the room, which it's disembodied voices are unusual. Typically, when we catch a voice, we're listening on a recorder like 2 weeks later, right? And we're like, oh, that voice we didn't hear at the time, but it showed up on the recorder. Why it does that, we still have no idea. But this one was in real time. We stopped the recorder, we played it back, and we're like, yep, that was a voice that we all heard. So a neat piece of evidence.
Yeah, who wants to go around? Who's gonna go hang out with their all? Who wants to
Okay.
No.
There was definitely a male voice. I heard that too. I thought that was Brandon. I thought it was Brandon.
I didn't say
Yeah.
anything.
I didn't say anything?
No one whispered?
That was right behind you, Tim.
It was right next to me.
Wow.
I thought it was.
Let me have it.
Well, that should get caught in this recording for sure. Okay.
He did not go into the master bedroom.
No.
So I'm gonna play that one more time. We'll just play it to the
Who wants to go around? Who's gonna go hang out with their all? Who wants to
So we isolated that, we slowed it down. It definitely says his name. It definitely says Tanner. And he heard it so much, he said it was like right next to him that he stopped, turned around and said, what, like we had just said.
That's really cool. All right, our last location before we wrap up for the evening is the Grand Opera House in Dubuque. Yes, it's a beautiful building. And it's becoming more and more popular with paranormal investigators. And this is a good time to say a segue. We have public investigation events because we do not charge property owners to help them in their homes. We do it purely because we enjoy helping people. So we do public investigations to raise money, to buy equipment, to pay for gas, to help other people. And we have our next paranormal public investigation on March 12th at the Grand Opera House. So it's $50 and you get to come have snacks, listen, get a presentation of our best evidence, and then you actually get to participate in a full-on investigation with our team in the entire building using all of our equipment. So they usually sell out pretty quickly. So we actually have a drawing. So if any of you want to put your name in, we're going to draw a name for a free spot at that investigation when we get home. So we won't talk about that one yet. So the Grand Opera House is located in Dubuque. It was built in 1889. The theater hosted many performers, including Jack Benny, Will Rogers, and Henry Fonda. You young people will not know who they are. The old people will. Yes. In 1915, as silent films became popular, the Grand installed a fly-in screen. And the Grand is Dubuque's only surviving opera house and continues to host a live theater.
So claims at the Grand have been going on for a long time. When you go to Dubuque and you ask about like what buildings are haunted, the Grand always comes up. There's been stories about it for forever. Probably the most common claim is that when people are in the theater, this is particularly like staff members or people who are on the cleaning crew, when they're the only ones in the building and they're cleaning the theater, they'll see people in the audience. It freaked out one cleaning lady so much that she dropped her stuff, ran out of the building, and called the police. And police came, of course, there's no one in the building. We actually had on one public event, we heard, I had two guys with me in my group. And of course, after the event was over, they told me this, but they also cleaned at the Grand Opera House. Apparently this spirit has something for cleaning people. I don't know what it is, but they were up in what they, it's a big ballet room, and they were cleaning the floors, and he was leaning down or something, and he, on the wall next to him, heard 3 loud bangs right next to his head. Scared the crap out of him. He left all of his stuff there, ran down the stairs, never came and cleaned the building again, but he showed up for a paranormal investigation. So
Strength in numbers, maybe.
yes, maybe. So that was kind of cool. Other things that happen, there's footsteps all over that building. People hear things. Footsteps, disembodied voices, people talking when there's no one there. There's one room in the basement called the paint room. And apparently some people who go into that room just get a very uneasy feeling, don't want to be there, get kind of a sick feeling. So there's lots and lots of stuff. There's been, you know, apparitions, seen all sorts of stuff, and every single floor has some kind of thing.
Evidence time. Okay, so this was during a necrophonic session. We started getting weird static feedback, which is not normal when we're using the necrophonic on our cell phones. And at the same time, we catch a whole bunch of weird moans on our recorder. So, to a lesser extent, it's similar to that clip we had at Edinburgh Manor, where there's like static and weirdness, then voices come in with it. And that is not supposed to be like on the necrophonic like that. That sound is not a necrophonic thing. So we don't know why that happened. That's fine. While you're doing that, I'll mention, I do have my business cards up here, which has our Facebook page on it, Instagram, Twitter. It also has our website, and we post evidence from all of our cases on our website, so you can go and listen and watch and see all. If you want to go down a rabbit hole and waste an evening, you can go do that.
So this one actually happens right after their session where they get those moments. So they're walking out of the theater, and again, they've left, so there's nobody in the theater at the time, and they get a female voice, and we'll let you listen to it and then see. Here.
Yeah.
It's kind of breath.
Very good.
Yeah, come back. There might be a come before it, we don't know. So yeah, come back here. So that's again something intelligent because they're walking out of the building, so it makes sense that's something to be saying. Come back here.
Now for the last piece of evidence. I'm putting away my notes because I don't need them for this one. This is probably the best piece of visual evidence we have ever caught. There we go. Okay, so if you remember the photo of the Grand Opera House, it has 5 floors. On the 5th floor is their costume shop, and it's very narrow. The walls, the ceiling is there. I mean, the roof is there, so it's very angled. It's basically one little narrow hallway, or not even a hallway, just a walk space, probably about a foot and a half wide. And on both sides, all the way down, costumes. You can't get in there. You can't do anything. Can't move around. You have to stay in a little bitty walkway. So this was actually when we were training with our old team. We were using a thermal imaging camera. Do you ever know what that is? Okay, it measures temperature. And we're pointing this up about 8 to 10 feet in the air. You'll see people come into the frame and that they're red and yellow and orange, giving off heat. But what you're going to see at the end of the video, you're going to be looking right around here. You're going to see something, and we'll play it a couple times, and then I'll explain. We'll try and freeze frame and explain what we think is going on. So obviously a person, obviously another person, but right. We'll play that again. This isn't the one we have slow-mo, is it? Okay. Okay, then now we'll freeze frame on this. So you saw that thing move, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll freeze. Oh, perfect. Okay. So again, this is 8 to 10 feet in the air.
On top of a bunch of it.
On top of a bunch of costumes that no human can get into. You'll also notice that this thing is not giving off any heat whatsoever. So it is not a person, it is not a living animal, it's not a bat, it's not a dove, it's not a pigeon, it's not giving off any heat whatsoever. It's actually a little bit, well, it's cool, but it's not giving off any kind of heat signature. So when that thing sees us, it won't play it again after I explain. When that thing sees us, it does this. It literally ducks and tries to get out of the frame. We didn't see this at the time. I was actually the one who was lucky enough to be reviewing this piece of evidence, and I called up our director at the time and said, holy crap, you have to take a look at this. He goes, oh yeah, whatever. I said, no.
First investigation.
Yeah, first investigation. So you have to take a look at it. Oh yeah, whatever. Yeah, what we see is, we see a face right here, eye, nose right there, mouth right there. It looks like she has a little hood on over her head. What does that look like?
Wings.
Yes. There's as Ali mentioned earlier, there are all kinds of different spirits and hauntings. There are a group of spirits called elementals. Elementals would be your gnomes, trolls, sprites, fairies, angels, all kinds of those things. So we believe, and we'll play it again a couple more times, but when it ducks, its wing actually either, we can't determine because it's the way it is, it either flutters or it shrinks and gets bigger. And again, all it is, it's just ducking out, it's ducking behind whatever's there out of our way. But we'll play it a couple more times, and you can, that gives me goosebumps every single time. See, yeah, that's creepy, isn't it?
Yeah.
This was such a cool piece of evidence. We actually, we went to shortly after we caught this, we were going to a paranormal convention in Minnesota, and Grant Wilson, Grant Wilson is from Ghost Hunters. He's one of the forefathers of paranormal, one of the foremost experts. We played that clip for him, and he couldn't explain what that was, and he has a history of growing up with elementals. That's kind of got into the paranormal. He wanted that file to study it more and try and figure out what it was. But we think that was a fairy that we caught up in the, and we have not been able to catch it since, but we think that's what it was. So that's the evidence we have to show you. I would be remiss if I didn't mention there is a donation bucket over there. When we're done for the evening, if you'd like to leave a donation, you're welcome to. It's not required, expected, or requested, but it's up to you. And again, we use that money to help other people. But we do have one other event besides what I mentioned, the Grand Opera House. On April 29th and 30th, there is the Haunted Galena Conference going on in Galena, which is a very historic community. There's talks all day, different people. We're talking about the tavern and getting more into that at that conference. And then for people who are attending the conference right now, it may be opened up to the public later, but I doubt it. We're actually going to investigate what's the name of the house?
The Dowling House?
Yes, the Dowling House, which was the first house, the oldest existing house in Galena. And we have photos of paranormal, that show paranormal things going on there. And then the second night, we're actually going to investigate the DeSoto House, which is very famous for having hauntings. And we have the entire hotel rented out and are going to get full run of the hotel to investigate. So we're really looking forward to that as well.
Have you ever been to the DeSoto House?
I went on with this through
Did you? Yeah.
It's a cool place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just go down to the restaurant where the lady walked through the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
through the wall.
I have photos of that too. Creepy.
That's like it.
Yeah. So does anybody have any questions of us? Thoughts on what you saw? Anything like that? Yes.
Have you ever done anything at the animals?
They won't let us come.
Yeah, you want to talk about that?
Okay.
Yeah, they used to talk about that on tours. There's not really a lot. I mean, there's been stories about that place for forever. Most of them they say are made up. And I don't think anyone's ever been allowed to go and investigate it, and they don't even talk about it now. We have contacted them to see if they'll let us come and do something, but they shut it down pretty quickly. So we'd love to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there any other places in the view that you've been to?
Oh yes, we've investigated the old jail. We've investigated the smokestack, which is a building right next to the Dubuque County Courthouse. It's actually a location of the first hanging in the state of Iowa. And when they hung the young man, they actually buried him in a coffin on the property. And later on, it was a knoll that was used by people in Dubuque. But they actually had to widen the road next to the smokestack, which used to be a hotel way back. And when they widened the road, they ran into his coffin and dug him back up with all of Native American remains. dug him back up and moved him somewhere else. So we're also to do a lot of private homes, which we can't talk about.
Five Flags.
Five Flags Theater, we've done that a few times. Yeah, a couple places we do. Oh, we do have permission. We haven't done it yet because we're waiting for warm weather. We do have permission to investigate the site of the Rockdale flood, which Rockdale was a small little community just south of Dubuque. It was actually 2 minutes from my house when I used to live there. But it was a place where in 1876, there was a celebration of the 100 years of the centennial, or it was the centennial. And a flash flood actually came through and wiped out 46 people. Deadliest flood in Iowa history. So the land is wide open and I have permission for us to do an investigation there. The open air investigations are a little difficult because you're out in the elements and traffic and so on.
So is that a different one from the Y camp then?
Yes,
part?
that's Union Park, yeah.
Okay.
That's a different one. Union Park, there were only what, 7 or 8 people killed? Nothing compared to Rockdale.
But stuff does go on I used to work at the Y camp. This was probably my second most significant paranormal experience was that we used to do overnights there all the time. Cabin full of crazy children, super fun. But on one occasion, I never slept well on those overnights. I would wake up constantly. But on one occasion, I woke up and I heard what sounded like carnival music or like an ice cream truck. And I looked at the clock and it was 3 a.m. and I was like, no way, an ice cream truck is rolling around at 3 a.m. Yeah, and I actually talked to another counselor and she's like, yep, I've heard that too. And there's neighbors who've heard the same thing. So
that's another location that they are not welcoming to having paranormal teams come in and investigate, unfortunately. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. Yes, if you know any Dyersville locations, please feel free to let us know.
That place has got to be one.
Yes.
Any place with that many dolls, gotta be one.
Exactly.